You have come here today because you feel something stirring inside you, something ancient and unspoken, a whisper that travels not through words but through wounds. And I must tell you now, this whisper belongs to the empath, but not just any empath. No, today we speak of the fed-up empath, a force most misunderstood, underestimated, and cloaked in silence. When the empath reaches the edge of their tolerance, the mask of passivity begins to melt, and what emerges is not merely anger, but truth, a rough, unflinching force of psychic energy that unveils the falsehoods people have clung to for years. You see, the empath begins life as a mirror. They reflect the pain, the shadows, the hidden chaos of others. They become the emotional barometers of the environment, absorbing what is unspoken, sensing what others suppress, and feeling what no one dares to feel aloud. But herein lies the paradox. This gift becomes a curse when the empath does not yet know their own power. And so they bend, they accommodate, they stay silent while they bleed internally. They become the archetype of the wounded healer, drawing in narcissists, manipulators, broken souls who feast on the light of their presence while giving nothing in return. But the empath is not weak. No, the empath is merely submerged, like the moon beneath the veil of daytime. Their power is there, dormant, waiting. And when the empath grows weary of being used, when they realize they are the sole bearer of emotional responsibility in every connection, a great psychic shift begins. They stop explaining themselves. They stop trying to fix others. They stop offering explanations for their tears. And most terrifying of all, they stop reacting. This moment is what I call the psychic withdrawal, the reclaiming of projection. You see, much of what people experience as love from an empath is not truly seen for what it is. It is mistaken as compliance. The empath listens without interrupting, forgives without being asked, and offers understanding without condition. This creates an illusion of power in the other, the narcissist. For instance, mistakes this energy as submission. They believe they have won, but the empath has not surrendered. They have simply been waiting for the moment when their inner world becomes more real than the projections they once carried for others. And when this tipping point comes, the empath becomes dangerous. Not because they seek to harm, they never do, but because they are no longer willing to carry what isn't theirs. And in this refusal, the illusion collapses. The narcissist, the abuser, in the taker, they are suddenly left holding their own brokenness with no empath left to weave it into something bearable. This is what I mean when I say they let you think you won. The silence of a fed-up empath is not apathy. It is sacred rage crystallized into discernment. It is the soul saying, I am done playing a role in your story. It is the boundary that is no longer announced, but lived. And when an empath begins to live their boundary, reality shifts. People who once thrived on their kindness now feel the vacuum of their absence. The psychic umbilical cord is cut. No more energetic nourishment for the undeserving. No more emotional labor for the unconscious. Let me take you deeper now into the dream realm where the empath often travels. I have analyzed dreams from countless individuals whose sensitivity placed them on the threshold between the seen and the unseen. A woman dreams she is standing at the edge of a battlefield. She holds a golden key, but instead of entering the castle she has unlocked, she turns away and walks into the woods. This dream, recurring for her since childhood, is the symbol of withdrawal from inherited roles. The key is her insight, her ability to unlock transformation in others. But the castle is not hers. It never was. It was built by the needs of others. And the forest is the unconscious, the return to the self. Empaths are trained by society to become palatable, helpful, pleasing. But this is merely the persona, the mask we wear for social survival. Beneath it lurks the shadow, the rage they are taught to disown, the disappointment they are not allowed to voice. And when the empath integrates their shadow, something extraordinary happens. They become whole, not nice, not agreeable, whole. And in wholeness, they no longer need validation from those who feed on their wounds. Now you may ask, what does it look like when the empath turns inward? It looks like solitude. It looks like a sudden interest in silence, in sacred texts, in ancient symbols. They begin to dream more vividly, sometimes of animals that speak, or of old gods watching from behind trees. They begin to hear the voice of the self, that guiding presence within the psyche that is neither ego nor persona, but the totality of who they are. And that voice says, you have nothing left to prove. You are not here to be consumed. In this mystical withdrawal, the empath becomes an alchemist. They take the lead of emotional fatigue and transmute it into gold, the gold of clarity, sovereignty, and psychic authority. No longer does the room dictate their mood. No longer do the feelings of others dictate their actions. They have remembered their own center. And when they speak now, it is not to convince or defend. It is to declare. This is why a fed-up empath is more dangerous than you imagine. Because they know your patterns. They see through the mask you don't even know you wear. And yet they say nothing. That silence, it is not forgetfulness. It is a reckoning. The empath no longer reacts because they have exited your drama. They have rewritten the script and no longer audition for the role of healer in your tragedy. People often fear the anger of the loud, the aggressive, the dominant, but they should fear the silence of the one who has seen too much and said too little for too long. The empath who no longer argues is the one who has made peace with losing people who were never really present. And that peace is dangerous because it is no longer fueled by illusion. There is an archetype I call the psychic warrior. This is the empath who has gone through the underworld, faced their own shadows, retrieved the scattered pieces of their soul, and returned not as a victim, but as a mystic. They are not interested in revenge, only truth. They do not seek to expose others, only to expose the truth within themselves. And in doing so, they become immune to manipulation. You see, the manipulator relies on your reactivity. They push your buttons not to get a response, but to confirm control. But what happens when you no longer react, when you no longer explain, defend, or absorb? They are left in a void, and that void is terrifying to them because it forces them to face what they have avoided all along themselves. And here is the deepest irony of all. The empath was never trying to win. They were trying to connect. But when connection is not mutual, it becomes consumption. And when the empath awakens to this, they do not seek retribution. They simply walk away. And in walking away, they reveal the truth that no performance can mask, that they were the source of warmth, of peace, of meaning. So, if you have lost a fed-up empath, you know this, they did not leave out of anger. They left because staying required the death of their soul. And no soul should have to die to keep another comfortable. And if you are the empath who has reached your edge, know this. Your silence is sacred. Your boundaries are holy. You are not abandoning anyone. You are returning to yourself. And that return will make you luminous, not because you seek to shine for others, but because you have remembered that the light was never theirs to take. It was always yours to keep. And now I invite you to descend even deeper. We must speak of projection not merely as a psychological defense mechanism, but as the invisible web upon which relationships of empaths and manipulators are spun. For every empath who has felt drained, there has always been a partner, conscious or unconscious, projecting their denied shadow onto them. You did not just feel their sadness, you felt the part of them they refused to acknowledge, and by feeling it for them, you were enlisted into a secret contract. You carry what they cannot face, but this contract is not eternal. There comes a moment when the empath awakens in the middle of the night, not with fear, but with lucidity. They realize they are not crazy. They were simply carrying too many ghosts that didn't belong to them. And in that awakening, they begin the sacred act of return, the withdrawal of projections, the calling back of their soul. Imagine, if you will, the empath not as a fragile being, but as a priestess of the unconscious, a guardian of hidden truths. Their silence is not absence, it is ritual. Their detachment is not numbness, it is protection. And when they begin to say no, it is not defiance, it is initiation. You see, society teaches empaths to be agreeable because a silent empath makes everyone else comfortable. They become the soothing balm on infected wounds. But what happens when the balm says, I will no longer soothe what refuses to heal chaos? Rage, accusations, you're cold, you've changed, you're selfish now. But in truth, you are simply no longer willing to betray your own soul for someone else's comfort. And that shift terrifies people because your very existence becomes a mirror. And when you stop apologizing for the reflection, they must confront what they see. Some will shatter the mirror. Some will beg you to go back to your former self, but you will not. Because once you have tasted your own clarity, you can no longer digest distortion. This is the individuation process in action, not merely a concept in psychology, but a spiritual unfolding. The empath reaches a stage where pleasing others is no longer sacred. Instead, They turn inward toward their self, and they begin to trust what they feel, not because it pleases others, but because it is real. And so we arrive at the archetypal transformation, the empath. Once the sacrificial lamb becomes a silent oracle. They no longer bleed to prove their love. They no longer explain their boundaries. They no longer seek approval from those who feed off their confusion. They speak less, observe more, and embody truth through presence, not persuasion. And here is where the psychic atmosphere changes. The narcissist, the manipulator, the unconscious taker, they feel the shift. It is not loud, it is not cruel, it is simply unyielding. The empath is no longer available for emotional labor without reciprocity. They no longer translate their intuition into justifications for others' behavior. They simply see, and what they see cannot be unseen. This is why the fed-up empath is dangerous, because they have transcended the illusion. They no longer need to be understood to be whole. They no longer need the relationship to feel validated. They no longer fear the loneliness that comes with sovereignty. Instead, they welcome solitude as the sacred temple where their own voice echoes clearer than the chorus of demands that once drowned it. And now, let us reflect upon the final symbol, the serpent. In ancient dreams and rituals, the serpent is both feared and revered. It is the creature that sheds its skin, that lives in silence, yet sees everything. The empath who has reached their limit becomes like the serpent. They do not chase. They do not strike unless absolutely necessary. But they see in the dark. They feel the tremors beneath the surface. And when they leave a space, they leave it transformed. Some will feel liberated by their absence. Some will feel abandoned. But all will feel the truth they carried. And the truth is this: they never wanted control. They wanted resonance. But if résonance meant sacrifice, they chose to reclaim what was once scattered their time, their energy, their breath, their voice. And now they walk differently, not with arrogance, but with remembrance, as if each step carries the weight of all the tears they never got to cry, all the betrayals they endured in silence, all the hopes they buried so others could thrive. And still they forgive, but they do not forget, not out of spite, but out of sacred integration, because forgetting would mean fragmenting again. And they have worked too hard to become whole. And so I ask you now, what happens after the empath sheds their skin? It is not the end of the journey, it is the beginning of individuation. You see, the empath was never here merely to absorb. They were here to awaken. And the awakening begins with grief, not for what was lost, but for what was never truly given. They grieve the roles they played, the masks they wore, the energy they offered into empty vessels, and they grieve the version of themselves that thought love required erosion. But from this grief arises a clarity like fire, not a fire that destroys, but one that burns away illusion. This is the sacred fire of the alchemist, the one who turns trauma into transcendence. The empath begins to notice things they once ignored, the subtle condescension in a compliment, the covert guilt in a harmless joke, the manipulation hidden in flattery. Their perception sharpens. Their intuition no longer whispers, it commands. They no longer ask, is this wrong? They feel it. Immediately, in their body, in their soul. And now comes the sacred rage, not the rage of destruction, but the rage of reclamation. It is the life force rising from the root of the psyche. The empath learns to speak it, to write it, to dance it, to channel it into boundary. Because rage, when purified by awareness, becomes power. And power is not control, it is presence. They stand tall not because they wish to dominate, but because they finally remember they belong here. Do not mistake this for ego. The true empath, once awake, no longer seeks identity through others. They seek truth. And in seeking truth, they become untouchable, not because they avoid wounds, but because they have met their own. Let me share with you a dream from one of my patients, a man sensitive since youth, who always felt burdened by the emotions of others. In his dream, he is in a cathedral. Everyone around him wears masks. Some smile, some weep, some scream, but all are masks. He walks through them silently until he reaches the altar. There, a mirora wet. He looks in and sees his own eyes unmasked. Suddenly, the cathedral collapses, and he finds himself standing in a vast field of wind and stars, alone, but free. This is a dream of the awakened empath. The collapse of the false sacred, the departure from roles that once defined them, and the return to the wild field of the self. They no longer seek temples built by others. They become the temple. They no longer beg for space. They create it. And so, what do they offer? Now, not blind compassion, but fierce discernment, not rescue, but reflection. They are the oracle who speaks when the soul is ready to listen, not when the ego demands attention. And here lies the hidden danger. To those who once fed on their passivity, the empath no longer plays the game. They no longer react, defend, explain, overextend. They embody, they observe, they leave when dishonored, without dramatics. And nothing is more terrifying to the unconscious manipulator than a being who cannot be baited, who does not need closure, who does not offer explanation where none is earned, because in that stillness, the mirror becomes a blade. It cuts through pretense, it reveals the hunger beneath the charm, it unveils the child behind the abuser, and the empath, in their luminous clarity, says, I will not mother what refuses to go. I will not heal what harms as a way of surviving. I will not soften the edges of your delusion so you may sleep easier. I am no longer your lullaby. You see, when the empath stops shrinking, others begin to feel the space they once consumed. And some will call this selfish, but it is not selfish to choose life. It is not selfish to preserve your sanity. It is not selfish to refuse to bleed for someone who calls your sacrifice weakness. The fed-up empath is the phoenix, not because they rise with flames, but because they remember they were never ashes. Now we arrive at the culmination of the journey, the moment when the empath does not just awaken, but chooses to no longer live as a sponge for emotional toxins, chooses to no longer decode silence, fix broken patterns, or wait for the wounded to love them gently, chooses to no longer beg people to understand what the soul has screamed in silence, chooses to belong to themselves. This is the individuation of the empath, not as a theory, but as a lived spiritual right. They no longer split themselves to be digestible. They no longer erase their knowing to make others comfortable. They no longer bend so far backwards that their spine forgets it was meant to stand upright. And in this return to the self, they become what the mystics have always been, both seen and unseen. They move through the world with quiet gravity. People still feel their presence, but cannot grasp it. Their eyes still offer depth, but do not linger where there is no resonance. They still love, but with wisdom now. Not all are welcome in the sanctuary. For you see, when the empath was asleep, they gave everyone access. They assumed kindness would protect them, but now awakened, they understand kindness without boundary is a form of self-betrayal. Love without clarity is self-erasure. Forgiveness without accountability is spiritual bypassing. The fed-up empath no longer romanticizes healing others. They let people carry their own weight. They understand that some suffering is chosen, clung to, dramatized, recycled, because it allows people to avoid transformation. And so they stop trying to save what resists awakening. This is the most terrifying moment for those who once fed on the empath's light, because the empath no longer offers their light freely. It is not withheld out of cruelty, it is reserved out of sacred discernment. They understand now their energy is currency. Their presence is sacred space. Their love is a portal. Not all should enter. They no longer raise the dead to feel loved. They bury what must be buried, not with bitterness, but with ceremony. Some people will say, you've changed, and they will be right, but what they mean is, you no longer let me misuse you. And so the fed-up empath smiles not with malice, but with remembrance, because they too once believed that love meant sacrifice. But now they understand love that costs. Your soul is not love. It is spiritual codependence dressed in devotional clothing. The fed-up empath becomes paradoxical, softer than ever, because they no longer armor themselves against truth. Stronger than ever, because they no longer collapse under guilt. More loving, because their love flows freely to what nourishes. Less available, because they do not confuse access with connection. They become the sacred threshold. To enter their world now requires presence, accountability, reciprocity, self-awareness. They no longer tolerate chaos disguised as passion, manipulation disguised as depth, or neediness masquerading as intimacy. And perhaps the most dangerous power they possess now is they let go without hatred. When they leave, they do not slam doors. They vanish like mist before dawn. No drama, no explanation, only the weight of their absence echoing through the room. And this silence, it teaches more than all their words ever did, because those who misunderstood their presence now must face the void left behind, a void where attention used to be, where compassion lived, where emotional labor was performed invisibly, That void is not punishment. It is a return of balance. The empath no longer tries to be God to the wounded. They become a witness to their own resurrection. Let this be known. The fed-up empath is not angry, they are free. Not vengeful, they are aligned. Not cold, they are precise. Not better than anyone, they are finally with themselves. And that, my dear ones, is the most dangerous form of power. Presence without dependency. Love without self-abandonment. Vision without distortion. A soul that belongs only to itself. So if you are listening now, and you are that empath who is tired, who feels invisible, who wonders if walking away is weakness, I tell you it is the most radical act of healing you can do. To walk away from what asks you to abandon yourself is not weakness. It is rebirth. You are not here to be their emotional landfill. You are not here to be a bandage for wounds they will not clean. You are not here to be consumed. You are here to remember who you are. To remember, to gather back the fragmented pieces of your light and return them to the altar of your own soul. You are not too much. You are too sacred for what refuses to grow. You are not bitter. You are clear. You are not cold. You are whole. And now you do not fear being misunderstood. Because you have chosen to understand yourself, you do not chase closure. Because you have closed the chapter within, you do not explain your silence. Because it speaks in a tongue too ancient for the unconscious to hear. So go. Go not in haste or fury, but in knowing. Go not to prove your strength, but to honor your softness. Go not because you have nothing left to give, but because you finally see the sacredness of giving it to yourself. The empath is not here to save the world. They are here to remember it was never broken, only forgotten. And in remembering their light, they become a reminder, a silent one, a dangerous one, a free one.